The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
Welcome to Faith Matters for this week. I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegay, Bishop Doc Loomis, and for his final appearance here is Reverend Mark Woods from Cherry Point United Methodist Church. And Mark, glad to have you with us on your last show with us, as you'll be moving on, right?
Yeah, good to meet you guys.
Yes. Well, unless you want to join us from Greenville sometime,
That'd be great.
We could Skype you in.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right? Well, all right, let's get started today with one of our subjects, and let's start out with a story that was out about the popularity or the decline of popularity of Pope Francis from Crux, Taking the Catholic Pulse is the name of the website. Admiration for Pope Francis is in sharp decline. The study shows. It starts out saying 3 years into his papacy, a recent study shows global admiration for Pope Francis is in sharp decline. The pontiff fell 7 spots in 2016, from 6th down to 13 among the world's men, the biggest drop for anyone on last year's list, and is no longer either the planet's most admired spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama takes that spot, or is even the most admired Argentine soccer star, Lionel Messi is that one. And however, Pope Francis remains the second most admired man in the United States after President Barack Obama. That's according to a study released by YouGov. All right, now, first of all, any credence to things like this? Doc, you're laughing already, getting us off to a good start.
Does anybody take a study seriously that says Barack Obama is the most impressive, important person in America? I mean, I'm sorry. That study just went right out the window.
that was what you adjusted on?
That's what I was laughing at. I'm sorry.
We have to take a poll and find out who we think is the most important person in America. If it's not Barack Obama, then it has to be somebody else, right?
Well, it might be a Trump-publican.
Trump-publican.
So
I thought it was interesting that the byline on this was Crux staff. On this article, nobody wanted to put their name on this one, talking about the Pope decreasing in popularity. It was pretty interesting. But, yeah, I mean, those popularity polls, this is, the celebrity.
This is the age.
The celebrity age. And so it's just who gets
I thought I was back on American Bandstand Day. Dropped 7 spots.
Yeah, exactly.
I still got a good beat. You can dance to it. So. Yeah. But the other side here, though, is they are saying that perhaps some of the reaction is that all of the reforms that people thought inside and outside Catholicism, have not come to pass. Is that Mark? Is that?
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot on here, but it's church time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things happen much slower in church time. I mean, it takes hundreds of years to get something to move in a particular direction. So, which is good because the church believes in eternity. We have eternity. We have this what some might call a wild patience, that we can just be patient about these things. So that's, I think, some of it. I think some of it, when he first was, elected, there was an excitement that, wow, he's going to change a bunch of things. And that's just, I mean, the church is like, if you've ever read Lord of the Rings, the Ents, the tree people, that's the church. They don't want to be too hasty. Mm-hmm. And it takes time to think through these matters. So I think some of that is just kind of wearing off.
On another note, though, a different article that said Pope Francis has called for greater leadership by women in Catholicism in the future. Already in the here and now, there are multiple arenas in which women are the vanguard of implementing his agenda, including the church's response to forced migration, modern-day slavery, and war. Is this a different side of this same coin? I mean, is it dropping in popularity, but is he also maybe advancing an agenda for women behind the scenes? What do you think, Doc?
Oh, I think anytime your points drop, you got to do something. So, I mean, it's kind of, you have to admit it's a little odd that the day after the poll came out, the Pope is standing up saying, well, we're going to open dialogue on women as deacons in the church. Yeah. I don't necessarily want to tie that together and have all my Catholic friends hate me, but it is just kind of odd how that worked. I think this has been a part of his conversation. This is the challenge. He says stuff like this, and then it doesn't actually happen. And I think that, as the author points out, is perhaps where the frustration is coming from. Here's another sweeping statement. We're going to get back together with the Orthodox. We're going to open up to the Anglicans. We're going to look at women in the diaconate. We're going to open up things to LGBT, and then it doesn't actually happen.
Yeah, it was fascinating when they got into the internals, or the eternals, the internals on that poll, and they started breaking it out, by nation or by demographics or however you want to do it. But it was talking about that, and he really fell quite a bit in Brazil and in Central America. And I read another article on Crux as well that was talking about the reaction to Vatican II. And of course, that was back in the 60s when Vatican II came along, but there was a different reaction in the northern Western Church, Catholic Church, than there was to the southern, particularly the South American Church, and how they both responded to that. And one looked at it more, on the political agenda of women and racism and all of that. That would be the more Western look at it. And the Southern look was more on the poor. Mm-hmm. And that out of that came liberation theologies and, all kinds of permutations of that. And so, but in the Western, we're looking for political issues that we can kind of latch onto. And so that article sort of drew that parallel between the two, that you'll find in the Southern Church it was a different reaction than in the Northern Church. I thought that was significant.
There was a specific emphasis on the poor out of Vatican II.
Exactly. So as being a South American bishop, pontiff, or from that theater, if you will, he has a different worldview look on that than say the.
Well, he has said he wants the church to be poor. I mean, he said, right, Mark? I mean, this is.
That's right. No, I think that's right. Robert makes a good point. I mean, whenever somebody says, "Well, the Catholics say this or say this," it's a good idea to say which Catholic.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
There is it is a very large, lots of different languages being spoken. I think that's right. But the Pope has always had a and South America particularly, an emphasis upon the poor, which is not always popular in some places. It's not always popular, and especially if you say, I want the church to be poor. That is not a message that you're hearing from Protestant churches, or we're hearing the other messages.
Victorious.
We're declining. We need to do more and this kind of thing, and the Pope is not saying that. And so I would not be surprised if the more he puts out when it comes to theology, like his encyclicals or apostolic letters, that the more we kind of say, well, wait a second here. What exactly is he saying? And it makes us uncomfortable. And I would place myself in that part, in that uncomfortableness as well.
I think he would, or he seems to have said on some other reactions, that his view doesn't stray from the Orthodox view. He may be saying it in different words, but it's still the same view. But the idea of the emphasis on the poor also draws some reaction, I imagine, from the West, because they feel like, well, they're going to have to pay for it. It'll be they're the ones who have to prop up these churches also in the poor.
Yeah, and he pretty much has said that. That's right. When he just did a big announcement to Europe. I don't know if you read any of that or not. He wrote this big thing. He just won the Charlemagne Award, or the anyway, this big award. He just won it in Europe, and so he wrote a letter and actually gave a speech on his vision. I had a dream for Europe, kind of MLK and Junior, and so. He lays out this whole thing, what Europe should be like, and it's fascinating. And he talks about the, no borders, redistribution, wealth, get everybody, on the same level playing field and all that, and welcoming the migrant and everything. So very true to form, in his perspective.
I think it was the Paul McCartney Award. I'm pretty sure, yeah. So I'm confused. So why is Brazil upset with him? When I talk to Brazilian Catholics, their concern is that he's turned towards special interests and away from the poor. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's what
he's playing to the Western market.
That's what
Yeah,
I'm
sorry,
hearing, too.
I should have said that.
And there's a little.
That's their accusation.
There's actually a little embarrassment among Brazilians. I'm sure you've been reading this too. That they have one of their own. That there's a South American in Vatican City right now who's not following the historic line of the popes, that he has departed from it, and that's an embarrassment. Actually, have you heard that?
Yeah, I have, but he's really playing to the two audiences, don't you think? I mean, he's speaking to the poor issues, but he's also dealing with the political vision of the West. Maybe you can speak more.
In his first. I can't remember what it was. Was it his first apostolic letter? He made those two parallels, that these are not separate issues. Women's issue and poor are the same issue. So I mean, he might be kind of trying to weave those things together, as opposed to just picking one or the other. Because he makes that. I think it's his first apostolic letter that comes out. He made that. I was very surprised at that. So.
Okay, we'll have more to come in just a moment here on Faith Matters on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball again with the Reverend Robert Cornegy, Reverend Mark Woods, and Bishop Doc Loomis, and we'll have more to come in just a moment. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Reverend Mark Woods, Bishop Doc Loomis, Robert Cornegy, and I'm Ben Ball, and thanks for joining us here today. And today, or this week, as we're recording this, there is the General Conference of the United Methodist Church is going on in Portland, Oregon, and it is taking place through this week, and it's going to be likely to be subject to many controversial issues as we go through the week. No doubt, even as we're recording this, there's probably something going on in terms of protests or whatever. But in the meantime, there was an article kind of in relation to this put out by the Cleveland Jewish News. It's called, "Will Methodists Choose Peace?" Methodists know how important face-to-face meetings are for reconciliation. The church's history is replete with ruptures that were healed only after honest and sincere dialogue. The process often took years. Yet that is not the way Methodists are addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As more than 900 people from around the world gather in Portland, Oregon for the United Methodist Church Quadrennial General Conference from May 10th through 20th, certain factions in the global church who claim to promote peace for Israelis and Palestinians are instead pushing for an anti-dialogue agenda that censures and denounces only one party, the State of Israel. One church group in particular, United Methodist Kairos response, is promoting a skewed worldview in which Israel bears sole responsibility for the absence of peace and the suffering of Palestinians. Using human rights language to camouflage the real goal of bashing and isolating Israel, Kairos makes no mention of any Palestinian responsibility for the situation. Mark, as a fellow Methodist, are you familiar with this subject here about the divestment is where it often occurs in this setting?
Yeah. In fact,
we had that discussion in our annual conference.
I was about to say, in our annual conference, a resolution usually comes from the global the North Carolina Church and Society Board about some form of call to peace between Israel and Palestine. And I think even at the annual level, you have people who are, kind of talking about Palestine or talking about Israel, talking about both of them. So I imagine at the general conference level, you have some that are very pro-Palestine or some that are very pro-Israel, and they sort of come together in Portland.
It's elements of what's called the International BDS, Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement against Israel. Kairos supporters have proceeded to find allies, especially in the U.S. In 2012, Kairos USA Committee issued a call to action urging American Christians to embrace that movement. And but 4 years ago, the United Methodist Church rejected those resolutions. But I think that they have been passed on a lot of annual conferences now.
I believe that's the case.
Yeah.
I do believe that's the case.
And so what about this idea, guys? You other guys here, if they're going to be part of this, I don't know.
Possibly.
This is Mark's last show.
Yeah,
Mark gets this.
Try to give him as much airtime.
All right.
Forget it. But this happens at the annual conference level. So the annual conference passes something that says, we call for peace between Israel and Palestine. Then it goes to the general conference, and it's a similar kind of thing. But on some level, you have those that are probably suggesting along the lines of that Israel is sort of the dominant power here in this Israel-Palestine conflict, right? They're the ones who hold most of the power, and so you're going to have some people that suggest that there should be more action taken, when it comes to a nation state of Palestine or a nation state of Israel, more action to be taken
against Israel
on some level,
right?
Because, and I think that this is not unique to Methodism. I think this is kind of a Christian thing. Palestine is often seen as sort of the underdog in these things. They're sort of the marginalized people. I mean, if you watch documentaries on food or travel or something like this, it's very much it's always very pro-Palestine. Like Palestine is sort of the underdog, and so you're going to get this feel from some of these resolutions that they're not. I don't know if they're exactly saying, well, there's no responsibility for Palestine, right? That's what the article said. But they want to kind of take down, or at least say something in a negative vein about Israel and the way Israel deals with Palestine. I imagine that's probably what's going on.
Yes, and again, there's calls for boycotts, and especially of maybe pension fund divestitures and those things that are in anything that's connected with Israel. So this article says there are 14 petitions before this year's General Conference that deal with Israel, and only one that deals with ISIS, for example. And that's amidst all the other discussions that are taking place at General Conference this year about homosexuality, about living out the gospel, any number of other discussions. So, Robert?
Well, yeah, this has been a sore subject, and many of what we would call the mainline denomination churches, where they're into social justice, and there's some basic ground rules to social justice, and one of those, particularly in this debate about Israel and Palestine, the Palestinians, is that underdog, and strong dog. I don't know what you call it, the contrast of that, but that this is kind of the way you play this game, and so it's there are always going to be those that are going to do this, and that's the good thing about they have the general convention or whatever you guys call it,
right?
Is because this is where you've got to talk this stuff out. You've got to be able to talk and vote. And so now, which way it goes? We were talking earlier about how
trying to
the
manipulate
delegates
the
are
rules.
composed, and how many people are actually educated on this, have any kind of opinion on this, that are going to be there at this event. I mean, really.
And one of the earliest debates is over a rule that would kind of put some of these issues all lumped together without the opportunity for discussion.
And that's the way they do it. When you're a delegate, you get sent a pack. I'm raising my fingers, and it's
about a 2.5, 3 inch.
Yeah, it's like 4-inch pack
stack
of material, and then delegates are separated into subcommittees, and you have subcommittees that deal with different issues. So there is a subcommittee that's messing with these resolutions, and they're given a smaller pack that deals with just the issue of maybe Israel and Palestine, or homosexuality, or immigration, or any of these other kinds of resolutions that come up. So then those things come together. They talk through and then they present it to the entire.
They make a recommendation.
They make some form of recommendation to the general conference. So that's kind of how it works.
Okay,
it's very similar to the way the American government system kind of works.
Well, is there something similar in the Anglican communion? I mean, how these issues are discussed?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's a pretty regular part of the Lambeth Conference, which is every 10 years, the collection of bishops that come together. It goes province by province in the United States at their regular convenings as well, and it works very much the same way.
Now, has this discussion of Israel and Palestine been part of that at all? Do you know?
It has, actually. It isn't it's not nearly as weighted as this is, with so many motions or actions to be discussed and taken on the floor, but it is always a part of it. And it's really interesting because you have two groups of people, basically. You have the people that really feel like Israel are just real jerks, and that they've done everything that the news has led us to believe, that Palestine's really nice people. And you watch a Rick Steves travel episode and he'll tell you the nicest people are the Palestinians. And then, and it's just so unfortunate the way that they're treated, and all the tension that Israel brings to the game. Then you've got another group of people who are the biblically literate people who say, those who come to you with the sword, I will annihilate, and those who bless you, I'll bless, and those who curse you, I will curse. And you're still your Israel is the apple of my eye. And Paul saying, Has God come against Israel? No, I'm an Israelite, the tribe of Benjamin. The Lord loves us. We're the apple of his eye. So you've got these two. You've got the Bible fighters, and then you've got this other group who look at it very much in terms of property rights and politics. Yeah.
And Robert, pro and anti-Israel factions take place in our public life, in our political elections, and been in part of the presidential election this year.
Oh yeah, well it's huge, and the influence of the the influence of the Jewish lobby, is something that for some it's they just dominate everything, and for others they have absolutely no. It's interesting that Cleveland Jewish community this is coming out of the Cleveland news, Jewish news. So there's constantly going to be this battle, if you what is often said, if you forget your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And so what we're seeing is that a lot of people just really don't know what happened there. And so because of that, they really can't put it into context. They're kind of judging this history, this ancient history, by just a few episodes that have taken in the last couple of centuries,
and
last
also
couple of decades, really.
And looking at wanting to have very black and white issues, very, very fine. Emily Soloff, who writes this, also refers to, she says, my own organization, the American Jewish Committee, has long supported the vision of a negotiated two-state solution and watched in frustration as Palestinian leaders walked away from generous Israeli peace offers in 2000, 2001, and 2008, and spurned more recent attempts by Israeli governments as well as U.S. initiatives to achieve meaningful breakthroughs. Our current administration has been accused of being anti-Israel, and yet they will make various statements. So it's all over the road in terms of the opinions that are coming out of this country, and so that's reflected, Mark, in our Methodism. It's so many opinions.
No, I think that's right, and that's what General Conference is about. You're going to have lots of different opinions. When they walk out of session, you're going to have some who are crying and some who are happy about what has happened. That's part of the dialogue there. But I want to believe, as a young Methodist preacher who has hopefully many years of ministry before me, that the conference will do something along the lines that's a more. Well, it's Methodist. It'll be a middle way. It'll be moderate. It'll be a call for peace. That's, I think, what they'll do.
Yeah, again, as many opinions will be expressed as there are pieces in a Mr. Potato Head. That's
that's right. No, I think that's exactly right.
Do I win the prize?
Huh?
As Mark's last day, we'll have more coming up in just a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and thanks for joining us here on the program. I'm Ben Ball, along with the Reverend Robert Cornegie, Bishop Doc Loomis, and for his last show, as the Reverend Mark Woods is with us today. It sounds like it's your last meal or something.
That's right.
We have something else planned for you after this.
Poor Mark.
Yes, that's right. As we gather around different topics here today, this one comes from a RNS, a religion news service that we've used on occasion, and it says the headline is "Study: Changes in Racial Composition Lead to Decline in Church Attendance." The more mixed the Sunday morning pews are, the fewer people are likely in them. That's the primary finding of a new study from Baylor University published in the Journal of the Scientific Study of Religion. Researchers studied the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, where racial diversity doubled from 1993 to 2002, and found that at the same time, churches with greatest diversity growth also had the steepest declines in attendance. Kevin Doherty, the associate professor of sociology at Baylor and lead author on the study, says the findings should not be taken as a stab at racial diversity in churches. Rather, he said it shows that congregations that are not originally planted in church parlance as diverse, will have a tough time becoming so after their planting. All right, this takes on some of the issues of just any kind of study that subjects correlation to causality, and also the observance of the times, the various things going on outside of the nature of the parameters of the study that take place.
Well, it was of one denomination.
So
it appeared. I mean, is that what you got from the article?
Evangelical Lutheran Church?
Yeah, that this one denomination has diversified, has lost membership, and excludes all other factors in the process. Yeah.
And we don't know when it says this is always a troubling thing to me in a news story. It says when diversity doubled from 93 to 2012, it could have gone from 2 to 4. I mean, that would be a doubling.
Well, this is context, folks. Look, over the last 5 years, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America has lost an enormous number of people to the new North American Lutheran Church, the Orthodox remnant group, as they like to think of themselves. This happened in Anglicanism. It happened in Methodism. It probably will happen in Methodism. It happened in the Presbyterian Church. Mm-hmm. You can look at any Lutheran ELCA numbers right now and see an amazingly huge decline. So I think you have to take that into account as you're looking at this. On the other hand, there is no question that, I got to tell you, when we were planting a church once, and we were going to buy these really expensive pews. Mm-hmm. And the fella, we picked out the pews online, and we was beautiful walnut wood and all that stuff, and the guy asked a really interesting question. He said, "What denomination are you? I need to know that." And I said, "Why do you want to know that?" And he said, "Well, because there's different statistics." And I said, "Okay, you got my attention. What do you want to know?" And he said, "Well, the statistics are," he said, "the Pentecostals sit the closest together, so you can get the most people in a Pentecostal pew." And I said, "We're Anglicans." He said, "You're at the other end of the line. They have a measurement called BPP. I'll use the nice word. It's backsides per pew. And Anglicans have the smallest number of backsides per pew."
What a great stat.
Yeah, now I only tie this together. I'm only trying to tie this together really pathetically to say that there are certain churches who really don't want to sit together. That's another stat. People that sit together grow together. People that are spread out, those churches tend not to grow. Do you know that? Mm-hmm. So there's a thing about churches. And the article said it was particularly true in congregations that were predominantly older congregations. Those older congregations are slow to change. And at that moment, every pastor in Carteret County went, "What? I didn't know that." But we do know that. Yes, older folks are slower to change. Absolutely. So there's nothing surprising in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, and it's not just change.
The backsides per pew part?
Yeah, that's brilliant. But I think that that's the way church works. It's very slow to change, and it's not just on issues of race or any other political issue, but it's issues I think like that, like choosing pews. Who knows how long that can take? Or choosing carpet color or something like this. And I wonder. I mean, I think it's a question. Maybe that's worth asking is why is it so hard for us to change even in those little things? What makes it so difficult for the church to do that?
Well, I remember the first time I was asked to serve on trustees, and I was elected chair of the trustees, and I said, I think we have to remember we got to take the approach that every decision we make should be for the glory of the kingdom. It's not about whether or not it's going to necessarily please every faction within the church.
Right.
That went over like a lead balloon.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that
right.
Ben.
Oh, he's a rookie.
He's a rookie.
Yeah, he'll learn.
Church decisions are always like going to the rifle range. You know, the church is always ready, but the time between ready and fire is aim, and the aiming can take like forever. And usually the enemy has overrun you before the gun's ever gone off.
Right. That's right.
But this again, I think your point though about the change in those numbers, obviously pointing to perhaps a desire for more orthodox position is where those changes go. If you were to study Pentecostal churches again here, you may come up with some very, very different conclusions. For example, right, Robert? I mean that look at more diversity as more of a common thing.
The scope of any poll you take, I mean, we're used to political polls more than anything, I guess. The news is full of them. And the broader the audience, the polling group that you're going after, the more demographic changes you have in that. The narrower it is, the less reliable it's going to be. And this was this almost sounded like whoever wrote this had an agenda and was trying to push an agenda onto this thing, that there's this racial component to this. And I would probably say that, they kind of contradict themselves, because they're saying that the diversity has gone up, remarkably. People have left the church, but, the church has diversified.
Yes.
It's gotten more diverse. And so, what's your goal?
Yeah. What is it? I think it was Truman, Harry Truman, that said about statistics. And basically the idea is that you can pretty much be anything.
That's right.
But there are. He says. But the idea behind polling, being in broadcasting, I can tell you about how ratings work. For example, in this market where you're listening now, there are 9 counties that are included in that. It's not a metropolitan area. It is really a created market where there isn't one. There's not really a whole lot of connection between, say, Greenville and Jacksonville, or here and Kinston, in terms of other than a highway connecting them. So they don't have that synergy of economics. So, for example, you break down the diversity. I remember one poll some years ago, one of the ratings services that had said that there were no men 35 to 54 listening to Rush Limbaugh. I knew that wasn't true. Pretty much knew that wasn't true. But the ratings came back that there were 0 because they didn't poll many.
Right.
And so the polling is obviously skewed. One being one denomination, and also not taking into account other reasons why they would be leaving. Right. See, so diversity itself needs to be defined. What does that mean? Yeah,
exactly. And the phenomenon of the internet is that you can get access to all kinds of news.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's all over the board now. Where before our news was sort of selected for us through television and that kind of thing. But now we can go search out our own stuff. And so what has happened is this whole click bait headlines.
Headlines are more important than ever.
So what they're not really trying to get you to read it.
Mm-hmm.
What they're trying to get you to do is click on it.
Okay. Right.
And every time you click on it, it scores for them.
Showing up.
Right. And so the way that whole thing was set up to me, and of course I'm no expert on this, but that looked like a clickbait to me,
Right. But the idea of also defining diversity. I mean, my little church, you got a big diversity of incomes. We have a fair amount of racial diversity, but we probably don't statistically add up that way. So it's really, I think it's really interesting. I always found polling to be fascinating and also infuriating.
Yes.
For the most part.
Yeah. And diversity, at least racial diversity, it doesn't always work itself out, I think, in a local church context sometimes. I think sometimes you have communities that, for any number of reasons, cultural, economic, have grown up in with a predominantly particular race. But what the conversation would be interesting to talk about diversity in local context, but then maybe diversity among wider churches. So like, how diverse is the United Methodist Church, or how diverse is the Anglican Church, or something? That would be another way to talk about diversity, and maybe talk about it a little bit differently, as opposed to just saying, such and such a Baptist church down the road is all white and that church is all black, or that church is all Korean, or whatever. Maybe diversity within a larger body would be a helpful distinction, I think.
Well, maybe, but then again, it might be like the team that makes sure that the guy that makes a 4.0 average is sitting down on the end of the bench, so he raises the average of the whole team.
But did you all notice in the article the reference to the Southern Baptist Convention?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
99% by their call African American. What the article didn't point out is the Southern Baptist Convention is shrinking quickly. Mm-hmm. Where there's a kind of racial purity, where there's absolutely no diversity by statistical standards, and it is shrinking at a rate just as fast as the ELC or anybody else.
And we'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. As Doc, you're trying to defer. I give Mark a last word here, right? I'll give him a last laugh. That'll be it. For this segment, we'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegie, Bishop Doc Loomis, and also Reverend Mark Woods on his final segment, final show with us before he moves off into other fields,
That's right.
other fertile pastures. All right, let's talk about one more subject here. And frankly, this is a subject that we have brought up before, but this one is particularly striking in how futile it was. An effort by liberal, according to townhall.com, the headline is Liberal New York City Mayor de Blasio calls for Chick-fil-A boycott, gets ignored. The article says Chick-fil-A has landed in New York City, which means the liberal city's mayor, Bill de Blasio, has called for a boycott of the delicious eating establishment. This, again, Town Hall writing. Why? De Blasio, like other tolerant mayors around the country, believes the chain is run by Christian bigots who disagree with gay marriage. But even New Yorkers aren't buying de Blasio's claim, and they're flocking to the new fast food joints around the city. And as a reminder, Chick-fil-A is closed on Sundays. That's the entire article. I only brought it up because it's just is one more time that we have seen this subject come up around a corporate entity and trying to say that they are displaying a particular bent in faith when it's their owners that do. But I mean, what do you think about this? So this obviously is failing in New York City for this call for a boycott.
Yeah, I think that a good sandwich and capitalism will always trump our morals. So even if you had to try to boycott Chick-fil-A, it would be difficult. I mean, when it comes to kind of a capitalistic fast food joint that does everything, you know, they have people out there getting your order while you're in line. If you take kids there, they have, you know, they lay everything out perfectly for children. They kind of know what they're doing. And so I think it's going to trump a lot of people's morals. No pun intended when I said trump a lot of people's morals. But.
New York City.
Now we got to give equal time to Clint. Great.
Well, I have a special position on this whole boycott thing because
extra pickle?
No, because I raise chickens at home, and I've discovered a principle about chicken is that everything loves chicken, and I've had to harden my chicken coop to keep the critters
yes, that's right.
around the neighborhood from getting in there and feasting on my chickens. And so, when you're talking about a really tasty chicken lunch, people lose their minds. Yeah. And de Blasio should have known that. This guy's a political guy. He should have known that from long ago. But for a mayor to declare a boycott on a business. I mean, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, New York is what, 9 million plus. I mean, you have more in Manhattan, so you're going to have some of those that actually do. They're like, I'm not going to Chick-fil-A, but you're going to have a lot that say,
Yeah.
I'm going to Chick-fil-A.
The size of the pie is pretty large in terms of who's going to eat out on any given day.
Yeah,
but Chick-fil-A manages to, I think, as you said, the tasty chicken sandwich will outweigh most other considerations. But then again, people also have been known to secretly want to come to Chick-fil-A, right? Yeah.
Yes, I think that's true. I mean, Chick-fil-A has not been in New York for a long time, and I know New Yorkers who, when they leave New York City and go out somewhere where there is Chick-fil-A, they want to get Chick-fil-A because they just they didn't have it for so long in New York. But I mean, I don't think that we would say that.
Now will they put on a hat and a disguise?
That's right. You wear glasses and a hat,
Like Mr. Potato Head.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
That's right.
I saw him the other day.
This is Mr. Potato Head Day on the show.
It is. It is. Well, you know, it reminds me. Of course, I didn't partake in this, but some of my friends, and when I was a kid, would talk about that about Playboy magazine. They didn't go there for the pictures; they went there for the articles, and that's it for me. I don't go to Chick-fil-A for the chicken. I go there for their nice salad that they have, and you know that's the way that works. So I'm enforcing my boycott of the chicken,
and
not of the.
And a sandwich happens to slide into the bag.
Somehow those little nuggets always get in the bag. I'm not sure how those nuggets
I
get
think
in
on our
there.
fifth segment today, Pat McCrory is going to join us, and we're going to share with him this little idea that we've all had, which is to move all the Christian companies to North Carolina. So we'll just increase the Chick-fil-A's. We'll bring In-N-Out Burger from California here. We'll do the Forever 21 thing.
Hobby
Tyson's Food,
Hobby
Domino's.
Lobby in every town.
Hobby Lobby in every hamlet and burg, as we say.
Right.
Wouldn't it be awesome? We become that. That's it. That's
the
our
wedding cake capital
Oh
of
my
America.
gosh, that's us.
This sounds like a horrible social experiment.
I don't know. I like it.
And Chick-fil-A will cater.
Cater the announcement.
That's
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
That's right.
Well, it's running. I mean, boycotting is like this. I mean, this Chick-fil-A thing. It's kind of it's still what I find so interesting about this is it's still economics driving everything. So in order to make your moral stance, you use your money to make your moral stance, right? Like, and that's kind of what Blasio has said. Don't go to Chick-fil-A because they do something that we morally disagree with.
But it doesn't really follow in the great strain of civil disobedience. You know, like for example, the sit-ins and the lunch counter sit-ins from the 60s were about wanting to do business with somebody and not being allowed. It's a very, very different. Yet they want to try to claim that same mantle. You know, and that's not.
That's a
not
really
the
good
same.
point. That's true.
Yeah, they're not denying.
Yeah, they just wanted the meal at Woolworth.
Yeah, right.
Right. And instead, they're calling for some sort of economic boycott to force somebody in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it used to be that you know criminal activity was just that. It was criminal activity. It was you broke some kind of law, and there was a punishment for that. So you know you're going to boycott somebody that did that. But you know this is completely different than that. This is thought.
Yeah,
Criminality. You know this is
trying to criminalize the owner, not even the company,
no,
but the founder's thought.
right.
Yeah.
And this is such an unchristian way to act. I'm sorry. I mean, I have a social conscience, and I understand that most of us in the room probably do. But the reality is, I'm not called. Well, I'm giving you room if you don't. I'm not called to boycott people. I'm called to love them and to show up at their door and talk to them about Jesus and help them to understand that God loves them. You know, if I'm gonna have an influence on somebody's life, the last thing I want to do is shun them. I mean, seriously, this just doesn't follow for a Christian at all. Not that Mayor de Blasio is having that issue right now, but it just doesn't follow for me anyway. So I don't boycott anything. Robert, you boycott, right?
The chicken. Not the salad.
Not the salad. I boycott.
You don't boycott
I eat
the salad.
I
Okay.
eat the salad.
To be
I'm
fair,
kidding.
I do boycott Gold's Gym, but that has
Yeah, that's right.
that is not that has nothing to do with religion at all.
Yeah, that's right.
But you know,
all those mirrors.
I actually had this argument with another pastor one time who wanted to. I think I told you about this. Wanted to boycott Kmart because at the time they owned Walden Books, I believe, and or they owned one of the booksellers that was also one of the biggest sellers of Playboy and Penthouse. So they felt like there was a reason to boycott for that. And instead, I said much more like the lunch kind of thing. No, why don't you say we want to buy Christian books from you? We want you to put more space in there. We want to give you an economic incentive,
Right.
not a disincentive.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it's dollar is king here. You know what I mean? And I think Doc's point is, it Christians probably shouldn't use their dollars to sway in that system, but it should be much more of a kind of prayerful, maybe a relational way in which we influence people, and in different ways. And it's so easy to just to use money in that way. And for Christians, it might not be so much the boycotting and what you're boycotting, but what exactly is the function of money for us Christians.
Well, I'll give you a micro version of that. Is that you have, this has made news lately too, is the waitress that will say, this Christian group left me a track instead of a tip.
Right.
You know, as if that was really going to win her over.
Yeah, well, it's a blessing, isn't it?
That's right.
We're really blessing them when we do that.
Yeah.
Well, the whole purpose of the boycott is really for yourself,
Right.
more so than anything else. It's just making you feel like, in
You've
this
done
world,
something.
you've taken a step, of some sort. And
Well, I had that discussion with somebody who was promoting online petitions, and I said, really, that you have to make that connection. You got to get off the couch. You can't just sign an online petition in your pajamas and
Right.
expect that you're going to make change in the world.
Yeah.
No, I think that's right. And I think worship in our churches, those of us who kind of lead worship, I imagine, hope for that kind of thing. We get up there, we'll preach a lectionary text, or we'll talk about Christ, we'll talk about Jesus doing something, healing a demoniac or something like this. And we don't do it, at least I don't, not just to just say that, but to kind of spur people to action, trying to move into the world and live differently as Christian.
That's right. Mark gets the final word on his last episode with us here on Faith Matters. Hope you'll join us next week.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.